I mean, I use the term social phobia. It's a nice tag. I mean, just what it's like to be me is that here I am. I'm on planet Earth. I look around. I see other human beings, and they are doing things that I want to do. They're having relationships. They're happy. They're in families, and I'm trapped here in this body, and I can't do any of those things. I mean, now that I'm further on in recovery, I am doing some of those things, but for 30, 40 years of my life, I felt that a cruel joke had been played on me, and that I was trapped in this body, which looks perfectly fine to everybody, but in actual fact that I was extremely disabled.
If you can imagine being in a constant state of fear, a constant state of panic with rapid breathing, incredible muscle tension, feelings of disassociation, which means to me a feeling of not really being connected or in touch with your true feelings. The whole thing is just difficult to explain, but it's very demanding in terms of energy.
It's very, very hard for people to understand what you're going through until they're actually in your situation, because it's really terrifying. You go shopping and shopping is so simple to people that don't have social phobia, but actually for somebody that does, it's the biggest task. Like, it used to wear me out. I used to go and do it and come home and I'd be exhausted, a headache, a cigarette after cigarette, cups of coffee, and just horrible.
Well, social phobia is an anxiety of social interaction, a fear of social interaction, which can be a fear that you're going to do or say something embarrassing, a fear that you're going to look anxious, but the underlying fear is really that somebody is going to think something bad of you, all right? Or we call it the fear of negative evaluation, that people are going to think that you're not up to scratch, that you're a bit strange, that maybe they don't like you, that somehow people are going to disapprove of you or not like you.
You're really thinking about being the centre of attention, but not in a positive way. You feel that you're the centre of attention because of some slight or inadequacy or an incompetence. And that's what makes being the centre of attention painful.
So it was the sweaty palms, the hot flushes, I think, were the ones that worried me the most, because people could actually see that I was really freaking out all the time.
Well, I think a useful way to think about social anxiety is to view it as being on a spectrum. And at one end of the spectrum is normal social anxiety, the desire that we all have to be liked and respected and approved of by people. Then we have shyness, which is perhaps a degree up from that, where people are socially more anxious in more situations, reticent in novel social situations in particular, a little bit hesitant to take the initiative in social situations. That's probably shyness. Then if we increase the level of social anxiety, we get to social phobia. So social phobia is where the anxiety has become so severe that it actually causes discomfort or causes the person to avoid certain social situations. And it's phobic, it's out of proportion to what most people would experience in similar situations.
It is very scary because it's not actually like, oh, there's a spider, my God, I'm scared of it. It's just something in your mind that's telling you this is scaring you, and the more you let it overwhelm you, the more scared you get.
So by the time I was, say, 12 or 13, I was actually very, very phobic and had a great inability to function in the world at all. And my first experience of actually having a panic attack was when I went to I think it was a Saturday evening, I went to a church social to try and get in, and just walked up to the door and then turned and ran for it. And I'm not so sure that I tried too many other things after that.
In social situations, people with social phobia, the main behaviour is avoidance. So most commonly they just don't even go into social situations. because they'll try at all costs to get out of it.
It's the most terror you can have in your body. It's like a nightmare you can't wake up from. It's just a totally unexplainable terror, and much more terrifying than real terror of, say, standing on a cliff edge or walking out in the street and nearly being run over. It's this really, really strange, overpowering terror, and you just run. You have to run from it, you know, or you have to stop it, and the way you stop it is to run away from the situation.
If people do manage to go to the social situation to get involved in it, then they may use what we call subtle avoidance. So they may hide in a corner, or they may be careful about who exactly they talk to or what exactly they say, sometimes rehearsing ahead of time the things that they can say, which actually can be a useful technique when you're learning to overcome your problems, and when you're in the middle of a graded exposure program. That may be one very appropriate step, but it can also be a form of avoidance.
I mean, I used to have to take my little boy shopping with me so he could help me unload the grocery shoppings, because he'd be centre of attention then to everybody that was standing behind me, because they wouldn't be watching me. And then I'd say to him, "Oh, give the lady the money," because I couldn't make eye contact with her. And so then everybody thought, "Oh, isn't that cute, little boy giving the lady money?" Then I wouldn't have to worry about it, and I could just stand there and get out of there. And I used to walk out there with horrific headaches.
The problem was, in my teens, my 20s, my 30s and my early 40s, I didn't have what I now know. I didn't have the skills, so it was in a way futile what I was trying to do for my level of social phobia. I mean, I was just continually banging my head against a brick wall and trying to just recover by going out and doing things. I made no progress at all.
Treatment can be very successful. There's both pharmacological and non-pharmacological treatments. And I think what's important always to consider is the individual. So we can give rates from research trials to say, yes, well, cognitive behaviour therapy can give this degree of outcome and medication can give this degree of outcome. But it's a bit hard to predict who's going to respond to what. But certainly effective treatments are available.
Probably the most popular treatments would be what we broadly call cognitive behavioural treatments. These are treatments which are really, the best way to think of them is very practical or common sense treatments. They focus on helping people to think more realistically in situations. They focus on helping people to concentrate better on what they're doing rather than on negative sorts of things. And the most important component is that cognitive behavioural treatments focus on getting people to face the situations they fear, to get back into the situations they're concerned about, and by doing that to teach them that people are probably not evaluating me negatively. People probably don't think I'm stupid or crazy or whatever, and even if they do, so what?
I was happy because I knew I had something. I was happy that I had social phobia and that they could identify it, and I knew that they could make me better. Well, not they could make me better, that I could make myself better through them telling me what to do. I mean, I was glad. I kind of got home thinking, yes, I've got something, I'm not going insane.
For people with social phobia to get help, theoretically and technically, if you want to talk that way, they can help themselves. And the book that we've just recently put out does provide a very detailed step-by-step program for people with social phobia to go through by themselves if they want. We would, though, always recommend that, if possible, that people try and see a therapist. It's very hard to treat yourself. It's often very difficult to have a complete understanding of your own problem. It's very difficult to have the motivation that you might need to go through a very difficult program. And it's always good to have someone there to sort of help guide you with the fine details and to help indicate how best to apply the techniques in the program to your own situation. The first step in just about any treatment program really would be to learn to get a better idea of your own anxiety, to get some more insight is possibly a better way of putting it, so that you can understand or see better where you get anxious, what sort of situations you get anxious in, how anxious you get, what sorts of factors might change that, higher or lower. So getting this sort of better understanding can usually come through keeping records and monitoring your anxiety for a period of time, a week, 2 weeks, something like that.
Monitoring your process by writing is excellent, and I have done. I did it mainly by journaling. That was my way of doing it, I probably didn't actually use any form, so what I did was journal, and in that journal I did processes of writing my conversations down, and I think I pressed a long while ago now, but I would probably at times have run through some of those conversations with my therapist. So, any self-monitoring process where you write the thoughts down helps you with this witness mode, and also you can show them to other people, which is very helpful.
You don't need to necessarily use very formalised forms. In the book we include some set forms because it's often easier for people to have set columns and things like that where they can do their recording. But if people find it difficult to do that, and if they prefer to use an open-ended sort of diary format, or even just to sort of try to keep mental track of the way they behave in situations, that's probably okay. But it probably would be better to try to at least look out for certain types of things. And that's why the forms are useful, because they do point out the sorts of things you should be looking for. With the social situations record, the main idea is to start to get a better feeling for the way you typically react in situations. You might, for example, be going shopping at your local supermarket. So in the first column, where you write down the situation or the event, that's exactly what you write down. You simply indicate shopping at local supermarket, for example. In the next column, then, you would indicate what you were thinking while you were doing that. What was it you were worried about? So, for example, you might have a thought like, I look really weird. In the next column, you indicate your level of anxiety or shyness or nervousness, and you can use the scale that we put up there from 0, not at all anxious, up to 8, being absolutely terrified. Let's say, for example, in this case, your shyness or your anxiety was 5, so it's just a bit above moderate. In the next column, you write down or you indicate how you physically felt in that situation. So, for example, you might have felt tense, or you might have been shaking while you were doing the shopping. In the final column, you write down the types of things that you actually did, the types of behaviours that you engaged in that situation. So, for example, while you were shopping, you may have tried to hurry, and you may not have looked at anyone.
I suppose to a certain extent it allows you to separate from those feelings and take a step back and take a look at what's happening and how you're feeling, and realise that that anxiety or feeling, you can actually separate yourself from it and attempt to control it using your thinking and challenging thoughts and using those processes.
When I'm in a situation that's I'm sort of causing me panic, I mean, I'm in a room with people, I'm having a big reaction to it, and I guess I'm having a feeling that someone's going to embarrass me, and draw attention to me, and maybe, well, look at John there, he can't do this, or he doesn't know that. And that's my, that's my experience of my schooling. So what I'm doing is, I guess I'm thinking thoughts which probably, well, they're just not appropriate for the situation I'm in.
So much of our thinking is in fact automatic, habitual, and rather inflexible. Many of us have made our decisions about ourselves and the world way back and never really questioned it.
A lot of times it's almost my parents speaking, who were frightened of the world and had no trust of anybody, and it's their attitudes that flow through my head all the time.
I mean, obviously there's times when you need extreme anxiety, and those situations are when you're in an extremely dangerous situation. But there are also times where the level of anxiety you experience is inappropriate for the situation. And it's those particular occasions that cognitive behavioural therapy is useful.
And you repeat the whole process.
Now, the whole rationale behind cognitive behaviour therapy is contained in a few principles. One of these principles is that it's not really what happens to us that determines how we feel, but it's what we think about what happens to us, or what we think about what is actually going on, what we think about ourselves, what we believe about how we interact with other people. That is going to determine how we feel.
So if someone nearby me starts to laugh, I might think that person's laughing at me and they think I'm an idiot. Then I might feel really embarrassed. I feel really embarrassed because of that thought, that they're laughing at me, not because the person actually did the laughing. If that person was laughing and I thought that person's laughing at a funny joke they just heard, then I wouldn't feel embarrassed. So it's entirely my thoughts that determine how I feel, not what that person is actually doing.
The thoughts just keep going along their own track, and CBT is just a way of restructuring some of those thoughts to enable you to get a grip on anxiety and to also provide a degree of comfort.
If your feelings are very extreme, if you're feeling very nervous, particularly anxious or shy or terrified in a situation, then you feel that your thoughts probably are unrealistic in that situation.
But I suppose the major thrust of it is being able to challenge the way you think about various issues and to sort of tie that thinking up with evidence so that you're able to get a grip on your fears and on your emotions through your thinking process. And, you know, I've found the best way to do that is to initially start with a sheet such as this one.
The form that we have in my book goes through several columns. In the first column, it asks about the event. So in that column, what you simply write down is the situation or the event that first triggered off or started off your anxiety.
So the event for me, it is asking my particular manager a question.
In the second column, you need to write down your expectation or your prediction. That is the thoughts or the beliefs that were in your head that directly caused you to feel anxious. And it's very important there to write down all the possible thoughts that might go through your head.
So I have quite a lot of negative expectations in relation to this particular event, and I write some of them down. One is humiliation for asking a stupid question.
In the third column, you then write down all of the evidence. That is, how do you know whether those thoughts are true or not true, realistic or unrealistic?
So to challenge that, I look at previous experience, and that is that most of my questions are well thought out and have been well received. Some additional evidence is the fact that I've done all the homework, I've worked through the problem, and I've spoken to other people about it. And the next point of call is the manager. A third challenge is just the fact that it's reasonable to ask questions. In any work environment, people ask any number of questions. So I would write down here, it's realistic for people to ask questions, and it's also realistic for questions to occasionally be silly or obvious. And the other evidence is I know myself that I wouldn't berate someone for asking me a question in relation to work, even if I did think it was slightly stupid. And this particular manager doesn't have a history of berating people or dressing them down previous to this occasion, so that's some more evidence I wrote down.
You then work out some sort of probability for those thoughts. Is it very realistic based on that evidence? Is that belief very likely to happen or not very likely to happen?
Okay, looking at all the evidence I have in this third column, the initial expectation of being humiliated for asking a stupid question probably isn't very probable. There's not a lot of evidence based on the past and what I know about this particular person that he is going to behave in the way that I fear, so I put it down as 10%. I'll write down here in the expectation column, I may be perceived to be incompetent by others. Now I need to deal with that particular fear. And when I look at the evidence for it, I come to realise that if the manager did rant and rave and scream and dress me down after I had asked a perfectly reasonable question, well then others would probably view the manager in a negative light rather than myself, because I know within my own self that the question was reasonable. And I could also go and speak to individual members and explain the situation.
And finally, that should give you then a degree of emotion, which hopefully, if you've looked at all of the evidence and if you've managed to make your thoughts more realistic, that emotion should be lower than what it was at the beginning.
And looking at that evidence, my degree of emotion has been reduced. At the beginning I was feeling quite anxious, probably between a 7 and an 8, and now I think my emotion would be at about a 5. It's sort of like going back to kindergarten. You know, you feel all this emotion and anxiety, and yet the answer's meant to be in sitting down and filling out what appears to be a silly sheet. I suppose the only thing that you know, enables me to keep doing it. I don't have to do it as much anymore because a lot of it's internalised. But the fact that it works.
Lots of forms will do much the same sort of thing, and there's no right or wrong form. The important thing is that people can at least learn to identify the situations and their unrealistic thoughts, and that in some way they can learn to come up with more realistic types of thoughts. And as long as they're doing those things, it doesn't particularly matter which form they use.
These are the forms that we had to do at the Anxiety Management Centre while we were on the course. It was the actual irrational thoughts and the rational thoughts of how we had to set it out. And that way, I think being down on paper, it makes you realise that it's working. The situation was these people coming to video me. So I put down being videoed. You're nervous, but you also think to yourself, what if I make an idiot of myself? So you put, what if I make an idiot of myself? Because I always think like that. Idiot of myself. Then another one is, what if I go red? Because that was one of my main things, was what if I go red? What if I go red? And another one was, what if I can't explain myself correctly? So I just put explain. My irrational coping thoughts of, so what if I make an idiot of myself, because they can edit it. So I put that down. They can edit it. Edit it. And what if I go red? So what if I go red, because it's a video on social phobia, so it doesn't make any difference because everybody else probably do the same thing as I do. So I just put social phobia video. Phobia video. And trying to explain myself. The people that have social phobia will understand what I'm trying to put across because they're all suffering the same as me, so they will be able to understand me, hopefully. So I just put down, people can understand me. just got to put down the logical way of thinking to your unlogical way of thinking. That's the way I looked at it.
I think for the realistic thinking part of things, it's really important to use a form, at least for a short while. For people who really don't like using forms, I think this is one area where they really should try to get into the discipline of using a form, even if it's just for a couple of weeks.
Many of the things that you do or you have to think about, like CBT or restructuring your thinking or challenging thoughts, become automatic the more you use them. And as well as becoming automatic, the response time's reduced so that you find yourself very quickly challenging thoughts that you've always regarded as being absolute or concrete. It's very hard to get anywhere with it without challenging yourself and without putting yourself directly in these situations that you hate. Because there's no opportunity to put into practice the various techniques you've learned or to use those tools unless you're in the situation. It's only when you're in the situation that you can experience it all and adapt things to work for yourself.
Well, the behavioural elements of cognitive behaviour therapy involve going out and testing out your realistic thinking in real-life situations. But it's easiest if you do that in an organised and structured fashion that also allows you to progress at your own tolerance. So to progress at a rate that you can tolerate in terms of how much anxiety you choose to confront. And psychologists call this technique graded exposure. So the exposure part means that you're actually exposing yourself to the things that you fear, and the graded part means that you do it in a step-by-step fashion. And what we get people to do is we actually get them to start by tackling the least anxiety-provoking situations, and as their confidence grows, they work their way up to being able to tackle the more anxiety-provoking situations.
What I do to prepare to do something, well, I mean, it's actually the first stage very much nowadays is actually picking a task. That's a major part of the process for me. It's because I have in the past tackled things too difficult, so now it's picking a task.
The first step is to try to work out what the situations are that you're going to try and expose yourself to. To do that, very simply, all you need to do is sit down and brainstorm. You can do it by yourself, or you can get a friend or family member involved and try to think about all the different possible situations that you might be afraid of. You then need to try and put those into some sort of order, what we might call a step ladder or a hierarchy. That is to start out with the ones that are easiest, that don't make you too anxious, and then to put those up step by step all the way up to the ones, or the one that's the very hardest of all.
The first time I go there, just go, make an inquiry and come home, and so I build up to what I'm doing in gradual steps. So if it means going into a dance, a bush dance like tonight, or other forms of dancing, I will probably go I will just drive there the first time, go in the door and make an inquiry, and then I know the lay of the land and sort of establish what's going on there, and then the next time I'll maybe go in and try and join the dance, but give myself permission not to stay long. And then so the process to go out is very much about planning, and so that I won't set myself any task that's going to scare the hell out of me and make me unsuccessful in achieving my goal.
Now, there's a few important rules about graded exposure that you need to follow if you really want to get the most out of the effort that you're putting in at confronting these anxiety-provoking situations. So firstly, whatever you do, you have to do it frequently. If you just do something this month and then you wait a month and you do it again, then your anxiety level will probably be just as high about it. So you really have to do it frequently and repeatedly and at close intervals until you master the anxiety that's associated with it.
My goal tonight is to get in the door, join the dance and stay for about half an hour approximately. I don't actually wear a watch, so that's what it's about. And then, you know, I feel reasonably confident at this point in time that I can do that. And then I just have to keep on doing that. It's not a case of doing it once or twice or 3 times. It's a case of just continuously doing it for however long it takes for me to feel safe in that sort of environment. And then maybe after 3 months or a year or 5 years, I don't know how long, I'll start to enjoy it.
The other important thing is that you must stay in the situation until you feel your anxiety level start to diminish. If you escape a situation as your anxiety is rising, then it actually tends to reinforce your anxiety about that situation. And next time you'll be just as anxious, if not more so.
Even if I do have a panic attack at any stage, my training and recovery says I must stay there. You know, like if I allow myself to run while I'm having a panic attack, that will set my recovery back. I haven't done that for a while, so if I have a panic attack, I have to take myself off and sit there until the panic attack goes, and then it's okay to leave. So
the other thing is that you can't bail out and avoid it, deciding that you're really too anxious about it after all. You've got to try and set your task levels to be at a level that you could cope with even on a bad day. And then, even if you're feeling anxious, you do it anyway. So you do it in spite of feeling anxious.
I've done things like, you know, deliberately get lost when I'm going somewhere and I don't know where to find it. Well, actually, I make damn sure I don't find it, and just drive around lost in the suburbs where I'm quite capable of pulling a street directory out and finding where I am. But I just, you know, it's like it was in the past, find any excuse not to do things. And
the other important rules are not to take substances that will artificially diminish your anxiety about a task, and that includes tranquilizer medications, alcohol, and the other substance a lot of people take is Inderal, which is a beta blocker. Propranolol is its real name. That's sometimes prescribed by doctors to help people manage their anxiety. So you shouldn't take any of those medications. You should take if you're on an antidepressant, take it as usual every day, but don't take anything to get you through a particular situation. You need to actually confront the anxiety that it causes and master it.
well, I'm going to walk up the street and I think I will walk around the block. I think I'll just say, well, I'm going to walk around the block. I'm just going to walk past to sort of look at the venue, see what, where the entrance is, what's going on there, and then, just maybe not even round the block, but walk past, just sort of get myself together, my act together, and me just calming down and go in and do a couple of dances, hopefully so, a couple of dances and half an hour or so in there, and then come out and see what happens. I mean, I don't know what will happen, so let's do it and we'll see. Well, it was harder than I expected. I walked around the front of the building and it's about to be demolished, and the main entrance is all blocked off with fences, you see, and then I walked, and I had irrational thoughts. I thought, oh God, they'll all see me walking around outside, and I could hear the music. Anyway, I came back, found the entrance, and calmed myself down, went in, and it was like my worst fears, as I walked in the door, and that is, it was a very big hall, and there was hardly anyone there at all. There was only about 12 people there, and But anyway, no, well, and then I actually knew the person leading not that he knew me, but I knew the person leading it, and I had met him before, and they do this, when it's a small group like that, you can't just slide in anonymously and hide in the corner, and of course, immediately as I'm finished paying the money, this loudmouth extrovert is saying, "Okay, 3 new people here, come and join the circle." And I go, "Well, this is what I'm here for," so, you know, and got labels, name labels, and "What's your name?" and, you know, which is all sort of, you know, I mean, it's fine, and anyway, so I joined the circle and learned the dance, and did the one dance, and I gave myself permission not to do the steps properly, and I did one dance, and then at that point, they were having a break. Anyway, so I went and sat down for a few minutes, and I thought, it might be better to stay and do another dance, but I was just pretty drained, and I thought, no, I'm coming out now. So it leaves me sort of 50% celebrating, because it's just like another step forward, but then another half of me says, you know, like, it's quite ridiculous. It seems ridiculous to drive for, you know, an hour across town, pay $10, go into a bush dance, be in there for 4 minutes, and then come out again. But, you know, I mean, it's only in the last 6 months that I've even been able to get in the door. So it's just another step forward. It's, you know, it's about recovering from social phobia, and it just leaves me feeling totally drained and not really feeling anything really. It's just, thank Christ that's over, or something like that, you know, and just, you know, let's go home.
Now, the other really important thing is to acknowledge when you've achieved what you set out to achieve. Don't change the goalposts after the task. Don't come home and say, yeah, well, I did that, but I really should be able to do so much more. It's not helpful. Focus on the step that you've taken, not where you think you should be. So get rid of shoulds and allow yourself to take some pride in achievements, because that will help to motivate you to take those other steps.
But anyway, I did it, and I joined in and did one dance, you know, so that's sure is better than sitting at home for 10 years, you know, not doing anything. So, yeah. We all are extraordinary, but social phobia took that away from me for so many years, an anxiety disorder, where I had no sense of the sort of wonder of being a human being, and just anything is possible, and if you're motivated to do something, you can, you know, it's never easy, but you can do things and become things, you know, if you have a vision to get somewhere, it is possible to do it, and everyone has this courage inside them, and one of the places to sort of get in touch with all of that is in groups.
In any disorder, obviously, it can be really helpful to be able to have the chance to meet some other people who know much more closely what you've been through than you've probably been able to explain to anyone before. But there are some particular reasons why group treatment in social phobia can be so valuable. And one of those reasons is that if you go into a group with other people, then right away you're doing some exposure treatment, because there you are having to sit and perhaps interact with at least a few other people.
Because you're just working so hard, and you know how to do it, you know how to sort of be confident.
Yeah, it's almost like a training, you know, you have to.
Well, I wouldn't have recovered without support groups. I mean, they were the place that I overcame my fear of being in a room with other people and talking.
It's very hard to explain to somebody that hasn't had it before. So people that have got it, you can, like when I went to the group therapy, it was just really, really good, because you sit there and you think, I'm not the only one that's weird. Everybody else has got it too. It's really good.
Is that when you get all the symptoms?
So to come along and see other normal people is often a great relief, because many people have labelled themselves as weird, strange, to have this problem to start with. I mean, that's where a lot of the depression comes from, in fact, and people with social phobia tend to be terribly self-critical.
When I went to the group, I was very nervous, and kind of when people walk in, I'm like, hello, you're kind of very iffy, and then you sit down and you think, you look at them, you know, when people aren't looking at you, and you think, you've got the same problems, you've got social phobia, this is great, because just talking amongst the group, you realise everybody suffers. I mean, some of them are worse than me.
Oh, that's good, yes.
Everybody suffers the same things as you do. It's a really good feeling. It sounds a really silly thing to say, but it's a really good feeling to know you're not the only one with social phobia.
The courage of people who've never been into a room with people, who do it for the first time, and people come to groups who've never been to groups before, and sometimes people will come to groups where their spouse has an anxiety disorder, and then people are doing it, and you see people recover, and it just takes enormous courage. The reason that I'm able to totally detach from myself and sort of like be a witness is meditation, and not as much actually doing meditation as learning what meditation is. And meditation is shutting your thoughts down so that there is a place in you where you're just observing your mind and it's totally silent and peaceful and empty, and a thought comes up. And what you try and learn to do in meditation is you just say, watch the thought. It's like a paper aeroplane. It might say, hey, you've forgotten to put eggs on the shopping list. And you go, oh yes, an irrelevant thought, and you just let it fly past. And you learn a technique of you're not your thoughts. You've got like a spiritual essence above that, and it's just like tapes running through a tape recorder. And they're going all the time, and it's probably through that learning that meditation technique. I have to say I'm not very good at doing it, but I do understand it, and in the understanding I just remind myself that I'm essentially not what I'm thinking.
Now, medication has also been shown to be effective in research trials where it's been compared against a placebo. And the medications that have been studied include tranquilizer medications and antidepressant medications. However, because of the problems that are associated with tranquilizer medications, like the benzodiazepines I'm talking about principally, that would not be anybody's suggested first line of treatment now. Because they have the problems with dependence, they often cause drowsiness and impaired reaction times, they interact with alcohol, and they don't really give a sense of mastery over the problem. So we wouldn't be suggesting those as first line treatments. Antidepressants have been shown to be quite effective. They've been shown to help people to feel much more in control of their anxiety and to be able to go out and do the things that they had previously been avoiding. The drawback with the medication is that studies so far seem to suggest that it only works as long as you take it. And I think that's a real problem, because it doesn't appear that you could, say, take it for a year and then you'd be over it. Unfortunately, there's a very high relapse rate when the medication is discontinued. But certainly we have to consider, particularly in a country like Australia where lots of people, for example in rural areas, don't have access to cognitive behaviour therapy, that medication is worth considering. And I'd also add that very, very many people with social phobia become significantly depressed, and in that case there's a much stronger case for using an antidepressant medication.
Yeah, there'll always be times where you sort of bite off more than you chew, or the circumstances push you a little bit further than you want to go, and it's easy to have a relapse during those times where you just want to avoid everything and everyone.
Yes. Have I had setbacks? Yeah. Well, I thought life was a setback, really. I mean, it's only relatively recently that I've had a period where I've gone maybe 8 or 10 weeks without having some sort of a setback.
There's nothing wrong with taking a step back and moving forward enough to challenge yourself, enough to feel the discomfort, to feel moderate to high anxiety. And once you're in it and feeling it, then you can use the tools to help control it.
It makes you feel a bit down because you think, oh my God, I'm going to go back to the same old social phobic person, but you don't. There's always ups and downs and getting better. So that was my downer. I was just having the hot flush and feeling anxious, but you know how to deal with it. And I kind of looked at myself in the mirror and said, well, you're going red, so what? That's it. And I did my breathing again and I got back to normal and I finished off getting my hair done.
The main thing is simply to remind yourself, I've overcome this before, I know how to do it, I've got the techniques and skills to overcome it, and simply go back to starting again at the beginning and work your way through the techniques that have worked in the past.
When I'm having a bad time, I go, well, I haven't lost all the gains I've made so far, and that's my experience, that you always keep the gains you've made.
You can't just read a book and you can't just be told by somebody. You have to learn it for yourself by getting out there and having a go at things that you've been avoiding, in conjunction with training yourself to think realistically about that situation.
If you progressively exposed yourself to situations, you may well get out into the world, but in actual fact you're doing it with all this terror leading up to it, and my belief is the terror would stay, and you'd sort of have a recovery, but by working on your thinking, then that sort of quietens down the unhealthy part of your mind, and then the combination of the two works really well.
So you joined the thinking and the doing to get out there and work to overcome your anxiety, well, to master it, really, so that you can do what you want to do in spite of your anxiety.
Graduated exposure, finding other people who have the same problem, going to support groups, getting professional help. It's there's not one of them that fixes you, it's all of those things, and for different people it'll be different things.
If there's one message about the treatment of social phobia, it's that no matter how long you've had it and no matter how bad it seems to you to be, something can be done about it.
Don't think you're going insane because you're not. There's a lot of people out there with social phobia and you can get better. Well, you will get better, because I did, and everybody else in my group did too. So there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Social phobia is not a deadly disease, so you can get better from it.
It's important to try and do things that you still enjoy. Not to spend too much time focusing on what you can't do, and try to spend enough time doing what you can do and following up on those things that do provide respite and a break, and also provide a feeling of well-being.
4 months ago I went to a support group and actually shared that I thought, although I would improve my life a little, I would never recover. And I've believed for 50 years almost that I would never recover. And in the last 4 months I now believe I will recover and function, certainly do everything in the world that I've ever wanted to do, because I see a world out there which is unavailable to me, which is friends, relationships, social life, and I've got a sufficient taste of it now to know that it's possible. And whatever happens, whatever negative things happen, whatever setbacks I have, my spirit to get out there and get into it is much stronger, and I will recover. I am determined to recover.